Good evening and welcome. So glad you are here with us. I'm David Ackerman. I serve as the spiritual leader of Congregation Beth Am Israel in Penn Valley, Pennsylvania. Also have been a member of JFCS's board of directors for some time and chair JFCS's ethics committee. Delighted to be together with my colleague and friend, Rabbi Tzura August, who is JFCS's rabbi and chaplain, for a conversation about grief. And it strikes me that we're in quite a complicated and remarkable time, a time where there is loss all around us in the midst of a pandemic, losses like the death of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, recent loss of Congressman John Lewis, but also on the Jewish calendar. This is a time that loss and grief are focused on. Time is known as Bein HaMitzarim, which literally means the narrow space or narrow passage between two fast days, 17th of Tammuz, 9th of Av, which are all part of the destruction of Jerusalem 2,000 years ago. The text that we focus on in that period is the biblical book of Lamentations, which collects voices of grief, often in dialogue with one another. So in a sense, we're continuing that dialogue together. Tzura, I'm going to put some questions to you.
Great.
And let's talk.
Great. Just before you put the questions to me, David, of course, we have a lot of thank yous to JFCS.
Yes.
And to you. But I also like to start a session with dedicating the learning that, not that I'm going to give, but that I know I'm going to receive tonight to special people. So I want to dedicate it to my parents, who knew what it was to grieve and to mourn and to live, and to all the people that I've walked this path with, who have been my teachers. And so I'm so happy to be here. Go ahead with the questions.
How beautiful. So you just used two different terms, grief and mourning.
Yes.
Tell us more. What are they?
Well, grief is universal. We may not feel all the feelings, but they are the feelings that arise when we have lost someone or something very special, something that is a part of us in our lives. And I have a little drawing I'd like to share with you that will delineate some of them. So grief are these kinds of things here. We have shock, we have denial. Often blame will come up, and guilt. These are not pleasant feelings, but they do come up, not for all of us, as I said, but for many of us. Anxiety, fatigue, like you've been run over by a bus. Helplessness, a lot of crying, fears, unknown fears will come up. Changes in appetite, changes in how we sleep, a sense of loneliness, depression, anger. These are some of the things that we may feel that they almost feel like they're invading us. And I can feel it, having been, like you, having had grief. And then you kind of hit a place of despair. I have that at the bottom here. However, we don't have to stay there. And that's where mourning comes in. And mourning is different in different cultures, but they all help us get through it. And I've listed some of the things here. One of the most important beginnings is, well, there are actually three things. Reaching in, and I'll go into that a little later. Really looking at ourselves. What do we need now? Who are we now? And there are ways of helping us to reach in. Reaching out for support. And reaching up for those, for our spiritual needs. So the first is this reaching in, reaching out, reaching up. And we start to develop a support system. By the way, a little saying that we have great support at JFCS, including bereavement support, and they're wonderful groups. Then we start to see that we have new goals in life and new insights. We develop new friendships, new activities, new practices, new habits, new skills, new interests, even new beliefs. And sometimes we find we have a new identity that actually is one we like. Because we've got new perspectives, we have new strengths, and we've gained acceptance. And with acceptance, that's not just tolerating, but it is having hope for the future and integrating our love, our loss, and our life. So now it would be great if we just went like this, you know, but it doesn't work like that. So I have my pen, you know,
So how does it work?
So how does it work? Well, we start somewhere here, and then let's say we may start with denial. And, you know, we go through these things and we're reaching out and we think we're here, and then the fears come. And then, so we reach out again, and this comes, and hope. And then we come back, and it becomes, as one of my friends who saw this, it looks a little bit like a mammogram. But what this is filled with, we keep coming back to those rocks. I was on a stream today, and everything about the stream changes over a year, but there are some anchors. There are some anchor rocks that keep the integrity. And we come back to those anchors that help us get through it. And we do. So we keep coming back and we build a foundation that's making us stronger. And that is what mourning does for us. And we never do it alone.
It sounds complicated.
It is. Life is complicated. And loss is very complicated. Loss is about not just the person, and I'll talk about a person now, but our dreams about that, our hopes, every relationship we have changes. I work a lot with spouses, and all of a sudden they're single. And when we lose someone, all the other losses come up too. The good part about that is the other losses coming back. We can also see what strengths we had during those times to get us through those times, and we build on those strengths. We never, as Reb Nachman says, we never go back to square one.
Right.
All beginnings have all the other beginnings with it. So we do build, but again, we need support. We need help.
Rev Nachman's statement strikes me as being similar to your evocation of the stream. It's right. The stream is never exactly the same stream twice. And I'm very glad you mentioned the stream. It's a delight to hear the bird song in the background where you are, which you're treating all of us to, which is very lovely. So are there are different levels and pieces and aspects of mourning, and it zigs and zags and goes back and forth. But let's go back to the beginning.
Okay.
I've heard you describe different kinds of grief. Tell us a bit about those different kinds of grief.
Okay. So there are, this is just, you know, as we said, grief is complicated. This is just kind of to put them into categories. There is normal grief. What is normal grief? You go through the stages, you get help. You may slide back, but you get help, and you move forward. You move backward and forward, but you are constantly in transition and transformation. That is normal grieving, when we do have help and mourning practices. And that a normal grieving is even though the circumstances may not be normal, it may be a horrible situation that caused the death, or death out of order, someone young, you know, all the different ways that people die, and our grieving and our mourning is different for each of those. But we do go through a process, and we get there. The next I want to talk about, which I think is very apt for our time, as you mentioned, David, these are most unusual times, and that's anticipatory grief. Now, I've worked in hospice for many years, and what we know, and if we've gone through it ourselves, we know we're already anticipating the death. Even though the person's still there, we're anticipating. And anticipating, we're feeling those feelings already. That's anticipatory death. And I will, grief. And in these times, these uncertain times, we don't know what's happening yet. We are anticipating, along with our hopes and our dreams and our work to get, you know, make a better world, which we do have. And we keep, people like you keep reminding us of that, right? There's also, right, the sense that we're anticipating, well, the what ifs. How am I going to feel? You know, am I going to have that job? Am I going to have the house? Am I going to be able to sustain myself? Am I going to get sick? Am I going to die? You know, all the what ifs. That's anticipatory grief. And then the last category is complicated grief. Complicated doesn't mean the situation in which someone died is complicated, like a child. It means that we're stuck here. We're stuck in the grief, and we are having a really hard time getting out of it, more than usual. Now, we all get stuck at times. Most of us do. I can't say all for everybody, but most of us will get stuck at times, and especially at holidays and special events. You know, we go right back, and you know, the unveiling, all those things, the birthdays, the anniversaries, we feel it. But with complicated grief, we can't get out of the hole. And we really need in-depth help with that. And luckily, there are experts in complicated grief, and it's a fabulous process, by the way. I'm a proponent of it. But those are the different types of grief. So it's not so much the situation that somebody died, it's where we are in the process.
Speaking of process, want to just take an opportunity to invite questions and comments from our audience. Do we call our audience our audience? Okay. I got the go ahead from our friends, from our community, so send those questions, and we'd love to incorporate your questions into this conversation as well. So grief is by no means reserved for just the death of a loved one. We can grieve over lots of things, I imagine.
Absolutely. And we can, and we do. And I was thinking earlier, I've been obsessed by this, not only this topic, because I had a very early loss in my life. So it's very deep for me, but of course in preparation. And I was thinking, you know, remember that first toy we lost? It's not a big thing now we look back, but oh my God, we lost it. Our friend, maybe it was a teddy bear or a doll. Maybe actually then we lost a good friend, or we had to move. You know, we go through many losses through life. If we're fortunate, we have guides along the way to help us. You know, people have been talking about grief over, somebody mentioned to me recently, you know, not going to a prom. It's grief.
Yeah.
It's not the same, because after all, when we lose someone, we lose, I won't say we lose a part of ourselves. For a while, we lose a part of ourselves. We reintegrate that person into our life again, but it's visceral. We will heal. but there are so many: loss of a job, loss of a career. When I changed career, I lost my identity. It really took me a while.
And the process then was a grief and mourning process?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Thank God for my therapists and my rabbis and my friends.
Right. Right.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'd be still mourning what I'm not doing instead of loving what I do.
You know, you mentioned loss of prom, and in our home we have dealt over these last weeks with loss of a summer camp summer.
Yes.
And I very much recognize that process as one of grief and mourning that my daughter has gone through, and actually all the rest of us have gone through it with her.
I was thinking of you in that, David, because I know you spend time with them in the camp, and
Yeah.
I just thought, wow, what a different year.
Oh, it's been very strange. But you know, but okay, so what do people do to what can one do to cope? And especially now in this pandemic time, in this COVID time, filled with loss of all kinds for so many people. How do we get ourselves through this?
Well, we do need to reach out, and you know, one of the things that we don't have now, and I was thinking that usually, you know, words often don't suffice at a loss. So I'll often say, "Can I give you a hug?" Well, I can't give you a hug.
We can do that, but it's not right. It's not
Right.
the same thing.
But what is a hug saying? And I think we have to get through what is our normal way of doing it to what's the feeling behind it. A hug is saying, I feel close to you. I want the best for you. And in a way, I love you. So I think love is got to be a big part of whatever it is. You know, with the prom, I never went to my school prom, so I can't really talk about it. But I want to tell you a great story, and it's about a graduation. So my husband graduated from Stuyvesant High School, and in the near the beginning of the graduation, the principal didn't like the attitude of the kids. I forget what it was about. And he said, "We're calling this off." And he did. He called it off.
Oh my.
They never had the rest of their graduation. Roll ahead 50 years, that class made a graduation. And they had their graduation. And they got graduation certificates, and they had the valedictorian speech, but they also, it was coming from such a deep place of how much that education meant to them. So, you know, we may not be able to do it now, but I was thinking, you know, with a prom, when there's a reunion, have a prom, get online, show those dresses. You know, what's important? We want to be seen, we want to be heard, we want to be loved. And so if we can get under what those things are and make it happen in this virtual world, as you're doing now with the podcast, I think it's fabulous, David. He's doing podcasts, folks.
Thank you for the plug.
Well, but it is. We
you can find them on You can find them on Beth Israel's website.
All right. So but keep reaching out. You know, learn new things. As I talked about there, you know, new practices. Learn how to. Some of the reach, as I said, reach in, reach out, reach up. I love those three things. And by the way, that's also Reb Nachman.
Yep.
Right.
Out, in, and up.
Right. And I drew something, Deb. I'd like to show people.
For our community out there, you need to know that Rabbi August always comes with diagrams and charts and Rav Nachman teachings.
Well, I don't know about the charts, but I always come with Reb Nachman because he helped me get through some of my darkest moments. The Outpouring of the Soul is a book of his that really helped me.
Powerful.
So reach out for support. There are support groups. if you have clergy, counseling, reach out for health and wellness. And that's all kinds of things to take care of our bodies and our minds. Reach out to real friends and family and know the difference between people who can really help and who can't. Reach in, learn how to reach in. It's not an easy thing. It can be pretty scary. Some of the things I think are helpful are journaling. Mm-hmm. There are many different kinds of meditation. A lot of people are doing mindfulness, but there are many different kinds. The arts can help us. Yeah. Drawing, painting, writing, reading, and then this is the other thing. Recall those past times that you got through hard times. Draw on those strengths. And finally, to reach up for spiritual practice, spiritual guidance, and or religion. Mm-hmm. And I separate the two of them because they're not always the same.
Right, right.
But those are the basic ones. For resources, you can contact us. I have many specific resources, but it's that reach out, reach in, reach up.
And all of it strikes me, helps to promote renewal. And yes. I'm thinking about that famous last line of Lamentations of Megillat Eicha.
Yes, that's right? Exactly, David. When you was talking about Lamentations, that's the beautiful thing with Lamentations. And I think that's without this chart or whatever. You know, we have such riches. It ends with that hope for the the future by renewing what the precious things from the past are. We bring them and we bring them into new light to use them for ourselves. And then, by the way, the other reach out I want to say is reach out to others to give support. It's the best medicine. Mm-hmm.
So, Chadesh Yameinu Kekedem, renew our days as of old. Those are the words. Mm-hmm. And we've got quite a few questions from viewers.
Great.
So we're gonna.
We do.
Look
First of all, who would you spell the name of the person that you keep referencing because somebody specifically asked what that name is?
Reb Nachman of Breslov. It's N as in Nancy, mm-hmm. ACHMAN, and a specific book that I kept it by my side is The Outpouring of the Soul. But there are
Wonderful.
lots of, and they're little books. You don't have to read a long thing. They're little quotes. They're great.
All right, so we have quite a few questions. So let me go to the first one. Let's see here. How do you help others grieve, especially when they don't realize they are grieving?
Oh, that's a double question. But I would say, be present with them. Listen to them. Being heard is the best way of I have a lot of best ways, don't I? But really be holding them. Let them know that you're with them wherever they want to go, and trust that they will get there. They will get there. Be present for them. Don't try to fix. Do not try to fix. They will have the answer within themselves. We just need to listen and
Wonderful.
love them.
That's a fabulous answer. Here's the next question. When there is a long goodbye, for example, living with Alzheimer's, how do you maintain the grief and mourning process? I'm telling you, they're good questions tonight.
These are wonderful. And so one of the challenges of greeting someone with Alzheimer's is that we don't have a whole lot of time for the reaching out. So be patient with yourself and start reaching out for help. as I said, you know, there are many different real places there. By the way, of course, there are Alzheimer's groups. Some are better than others. I learned something from my mother-in-law. And when she first had dementia, and I remember speaking to her, and she said, you know, your husband, Yosef, he never comes, he never calls. Now, my husband had just come back from being with her for 2 weeks, and he called her every day. And I got a light. She didn't remember. So I was able to integrate that after a while, after I was so angry at her, and this is where she is. So being present with another person helps us be present with ourselves also. And acknowledge the loss, and do our best to see the person, the beauty of the person that's there. It's very hard when it's your own. And I've gone through it myself with my own mother too. It's easier to see it in someone you don't have history with. But do reach out and take care of yourself. Get enough sleep and food and exercise and joy.
That's actually a good answer to a couple questions that we have that are not similar, but yet similar at the same time. Somebody was asking a question about the grief of miscarriage and the loss of potential of what the child would have been. So I guess that answers, you know,
it does. That's a very hard one. And it's very hard also because there are not a whole lot of, well, there are more now resources, but it's also something that can be very private. So, you know, how you can acknowledge that it's a real loss. It's a loss of so many things. I think one of the simplest things that we can do if people are comfortable with it is journaling. It's very simple. And then the journal doesn't have to be a page. Sometimes it's just a day. Say, I'm here today. I'm sad. I remember giving a patient of mine who was dying actually, and he was already anticipating, you know, not being here, a notebook and crayons so he could draw. He didn't have the energy to write anything. In fact, a patient once asked me, she said, would you have a pencil and paper? I want to draw something. I want to draw something because words weren't adequate. Find what gives you solace: music, art, journaling, and self-love, which is a lifetime process.
There's just so many questions now coming in. It's such an important topic. One topic is, you know, about dealing with grief when everybody around you is grieving in this time of COVID.
Yes.
Yes. So I have a story about that also. 9/11.
Yeah.
My dear friend, my darling friend, my little sister friend, his husband was a pilot, and his plane crashed, not in that, but it crashed 2 days before. And then came 9/11. And she had this great grief. She had a 6-month-old baby. And it was hard to carve out that time for herself. But we again, it's that reaching out, reaching in, reaching up, and acknowledging your loss when we're grieving is the most important at that time. Right? It's like the saying, no surgery is minor if it's yours. It's only someone else's, right? But especially with grief, we need to get our support system. You know, in hospice, one of the first questions we ask when we meet with a family is, do you have a support system? So during that time, they start to build the support system.
Right. So another question is, what are the right things to say to someone who is grieving, and what is not helpful to say when someone is grieving?
Ooh. Great question.
The second list is longer than the first one.
Right, I'm sure.
Absolutely. I think since we can't give a hug, I think that's actually the best thing to say is, I'm here. I love you. I think that's really, I care. Even saying I'm sorry, sometimes people who are mourning don't like that. Because they may be in the anger stage and says, how could you be sorry? You don't know what it's like. And we don't. But we can say, I'm here and I love you. There are things we can do, by the way, and I made a list during these times. It's not so much what you can say, but what you can do.
Right.
And so these are kind of gifts you can give people. You can give them subscriptions to online classes, but asking first I saw this great class. I'd love to buy you a subscription or a magazine, social distancing walks and visits, cards with some memories, photos, brief texts. I had a friend whose son died, and there was nothing to say, but a few times a week I would send her a beautiful picture. And the next year she told me that was the most helpful. She didn't have to respond to me. She could just see some beauty. Of course, doing chores, all social distancing, delivering special treats. Yeah, I'm here and I'm going to the store. I have my lawnmower out, or whatever it is.
Right.
Don't ask. Yeah, go ahead, David.
My wife's father died. It's almost 30 years ago, 28 years ago. And she was a brand new nursing mother. Actually, our oldest son was born 5 days prior. And one of the things that Nomi has said over the years is that the single most important and most comforting things for her were the cards that people wrote. And part of the reason why was because she could go back to them. She could read them at a different, when she was at a different point on that curve. But knowing that someone had taken the time to jot down some memories, to write, even if the content was, I'm thinking about you and I'm here for you, were the most valuable sources of comfort.
Thank you. I've walked in my work, when I could walk into people's homes, David, and they'd have the cards out. And they'd had them out for months. It was wonderful. Yeah.
It's really meaningful.
That's very special. And I know for a friend of mine, she received a number of cards when her father passed away too, and she would just keep them in a little box where she would sit in her family room. And when she needed them, she knew she could go to them and read them. It's an excellent suggestion.
And also then to pass down to the next generation.
That's right.
It's true. We have a question about reintegrating into life after loss. So especially when it is a spouse, do you have any comments or thoughts on that?
Absolutely. So integration is always happening. Because remember, I don't know if that person was here with my little picture, that all the mourning processes they help to transform us and integrate into life again. With a spouse, it's so hard. It's not only the past and the present, but it's the future. And so I think being in a group with other people who've lost a spouse can be very, very helpful, where you help each other. Support groups very different from counseling, because you're supporting as you're being supported, and you start to get those strengths. It's a process. Be patient. Some people do it quickly, especially you guys, you know. But it can be harder for women.
Say more about that. Is there, do you see a real gender difference?
I do. Now, I can't say for same-sex couples. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the couples I work with are male and female. So I think this new generation of non-binary are going to teach us a lot of stuff about that. But you know, I'm not. That's not where I've lived. So yeah, you know, it seems that men seem. Okay, it's going to go back to the early prom days. It's hard for a woman. It was hard for women of my generation to ask a guy out, right? It's still harder. Men, it's more expected. And I have seen men, they just, they're grabbed up quickly and they're open to it.
Mm-hmm.
They're open to it. You know, I think maybe we women need to feel more entitled to have a new love in our life, and that we won't feel guilty. Guilt is a big thing. I don't know if there are any questions about guilt, you know, but to realize that,
actually, yes,
that our loved one wants us to be happy, and to not deny ourselves that we'll never forget them. We'll never stop loving them. That's impossible.
So before we talk about, you know, we do have a question about the bereavement services that JFCS offers. But before we do that question, I would like to ask this last one, which is, you know, how does one cope with grief during COVID when you cannot be with your loved ones, either in their final moments or even to have a normal funeral, or even, you know, Shiva for those that observe and that sort of thing?
So that's and thank you for bringing that up. So let's say the first one, you can't be with them. And the next best thing might be Zoom, but often people in their last moments, they're not even able to do that, or FaceTime. So the next best thing would be to get somebody to hold a phone up. And there are 4 things to be able to be close and say goodbye. And I want to share them right now. One is what most people do say: I love you and I appreciate you. 2, you're not alone. I am still so connected with you. 3, if you feel you need forgiving for anything, I forgive you. Will you forgive me? Now, if it's a very difficult situation where there is no forgiveness, to just say, we've done the best we can. We've done and we're doing. And the final thing is, well, almost final. Our family will take care of each other. We are going to take care of each other, and you'll always be a part of us. We will never forget you, and we'll make sure our children never forget you, to speak that to them. If you can't, say it out loud. You know, get your family together on a phone call or a Zoom call or FaceTime. Say those things. And I can post them at another time. I don't know how to do that, Deb, but we can do that. It's so healing. It's so healing. And it is what is in the Jewish Vidui, secularized.
Mm-hmm.
So if there are, of course, religious things to do the best we can, make a nuisance of yourself with the nurses. They will love you for it. They want to help. So that's in saying goodbye. Find ways of getting your family together. If you can do it, you know, this way, great. Phone call, write to each other, save it. Send photographs, send I think we have a program at JFCS where people are painting stones, remembrance stones.
Mm-hmm.
Share those stones. We used to make bracelets for the whole family. Everybody in the family had a bracelet. And I had kids in Hebrew school make them. And they would have things like hope, love. You know, there are little beads that you can do it, but something that everybody can share together. Make it a shared moment. That's just some of the ideas. We're going to have other sessions, right, Deb? So we can go into things more deeply. This is just a taste.
This is just a taste.
And there was a third part of it, which I don't remember.
No, if you want to talk about the bereavement group at JFCS, because we had somebody ask specifically about that.
Okay, so we have a bereavement group. Look on our Facebook page, I guess it's listed.
Yeah, I'm going to share the contact information in a moment.
Okay, great. We're starting a new group in August. I would love you to come. They are so powerful and they're fun. I got to say they're fun, even on Zoom. They're limited. It's not a drop-in group. Once we establish the group, that group goes for 8 weeks, and it helps us get through it, but it also forms new friendships.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's part of
I'm going to share the contact information very quickly so that people can see. There's our phone number, and then for support for COVID and other resources, there is the link.
Great.
That's it.
Yeah, we've had groups for many years now. I have one group, they're in their 3rd year. They love each other so much. So thank you.
So they don't want to stop talking, and I know how that feels because I feel like you and I could talk all evening about this and frankly many other things. But really just want to thank everybody for being here and for being part of this conversation. Keep those questions coming. You now know how to reach Rabbi Tzura and others at JFCS. Good night.
Thank you very much. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you.
And for anybody that still posts comments on Facebook, I'll forward them to Rabbi Tzura, and we'll get the responses to you.
Great. I have to add 2 things. I'm a rabbi. What can I say? And furthermore, be compassionate with yourself, be patient with yourself, and be open to receiving. Most of us have a hard time receiving. Thank you.
True.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. David, a pleasure. Deborah, pleasure.
Thank you.